Joining us now, Congressman Scott DesJarlais, 4th District, Tennessee. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Well, thank you, John. Good to be with you.
Now, by the way, this is unfortunately the 2-year anniversary of the Chattanooga shooting, the terrorist shooting, that attack on the military recruiting center. And I know, Congressman, you passed legislation allowing soldiers to carry on base with the approval of commanding officers. Has that made a difference?
Well, I think it certainly has made a difference in confidence for our troops. There was a 92 directive that disallowed carrying of firearms on recruiting stations such as this one. And you're right, 2 years ago, yesterday, I guess, is when a homegrown jihadist, Islamic terrorist, opened fire on our station there, killing 5 sailors and soldiers, and they were unable to arm themselves. So we took a look at that directive, which was outdated and wasn't modern for the new times with the social media and the recruiting that's going on right here at home for Islamic terrorists. And we were able to ask the department to issue a directive which allowed them to carry weapons, and that was done in December of last year. For 6 months now, they can determine who can carry and make those recruiting stations safer. And so far, so good. But, I think the important thing is bad guys know where gun-free zones are, and they're soft targets, and this helps eliminate that and create some uncertainty. It's not as much fun to shoot at someone when you know they're going to shoot back.
Well, you got that right, sir. And look, I commend your effort on that in order to get that done, because those people were just sitting ducks in there, as we found out. So thank you for that. I want to tell everybody that he also serves on the C-Power subcommittee that Rob Whitman chairs, who's on our show all the time, Dr. Whitman. Now, I know that you voted in favor of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2018, Congressman. That passed, but there's always a lot of things that get put in this bill that people get mad at, and they kind of dump everything in there. Is there anything in it that you objected to and just had to kind of go with it anyway?
Well, you're right. It's a long amendment process, and we've been working on the bill all year. There was 300 some odd amendments offered on the floor. I don't know how many in committee. There was a couple of strange things. Vicki Hartler from Missouri had an amendment to prevent transgender operations once a person gets in the military. If somebody makes that decision before going into military, it's not a problem, but it's been kind of a disruptive situation where somebody decides to make that change on the taxpayer dollar after they join the military, and she was simply offering an amendment that that couldn't be done once you joined. And it was a close vote, but for some reason it failed, and I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So that was kind of a strange one that just seems common sense. It affects so very, very few people, and it seems to create a lot of confusion. If you have a female that decides that she's going to be a man and she's living among all the other men in the barracks, but she has not had an operation. There was even one case where the female who decided to be a man became pregnant, so they were living with a pregnant guy, and it was just for the commanders to testify. It was a kind of a disruptive situation. Seems like something that wouldn't have been as difficult to correct.
You would have think, but in the environment that we're in, things aren't that easy, Congressman. In fact, we covered that last week ad nauseum.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we called it battle trannies, so I don't want to get into it again.
Okay, that was one that just popped into my mind.
It's just ridiculous.
Just when we were debating that,
we had thinking, Congressman, so you know, I had a unidentified caller last week, couldn't say his name, who serves on active duty right now, so you can't really criticize anything. So he was anonymous, and he called in. He said that they were in the middle of combat training. He was deployed in the middle. They were in the middle of combat training, and they took 3 hours out of the combat training to fly officers in to do transgender sensitivity training. I mean, this is what's going on now. I mean, it is what it is, right? You can't.
Yeah. I mean, we did do some really important things, though. There's been such a readiness shortfall. Half of our planes have been unable to fly.
Right.
You can't get parts. Our pilots aren't getting flying time. Most of our troops were not ready to fight tonight. They could do it, but they do so at much greater risk. And we were able to increase the funding over what the president asked for to deal with some of the budget shortfalls that have been accumulating over the past several years. And we are facing unprecedented threats around the world with North Korea, Iran, Russia, cyber threats. Actually, there's some huge threats in missile defense. You see what North Korea is launching, and then also hypersonic weapons. Both China and Russia are spending a lot of their defense dollars on this technology, and simply there's a lot of areas we've fallen behind. So we were able to plus up on missile defense. We were able to do some things to help with our nuclear deterrence, which is probably the most critical part of defense, and get more ships in the water, get more troops, get better pay. So we were able to do an awful lot of good things with this bill.
All right, excellent. Congressman, let's get to, if I may, this is a big issue with us, is the reauthorization for military force, if you will, AUMF. Barbara Jackson has put this bill in. It got out of committee on the Appropriations Committee. Now it's going to rules. We haven't had a reauthorization, Congressman, of AUMF since 2001, 3 administrations ago. How do you stand on that and why?
Well, I think Congress has a place when it comes to authorizing military force, and I think that that's certainly something that we need to look at.
All right, so are you in favor of reauthorizing it or not?
I'm in favor of reauthorizing it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's get now to, if we can, domestic policy. The bill in the Senate to repeal and replace Obamacare, a little different from the House version. How do you see this? Are you in favor of that? And how do you see it playing out?
Well, I'd like to see what it actually is. The version we passed out of the House after the second try would at least give people a chance to see their premiums lower. I feel like we have to wind down the Medicaid expansion. There's so many able-bodied males that are working age and capabilities, and they're not. They're simply not working. So about 80% of the country agrees that able-bodied men who can work should work, and that's not what happened with Obamacare. We expanded Medicaid to help a lot of those who didn't need help, and subsequently people who do need help aren't being covered. And then Tennessee and other places have just skyrocketing insurance premiums, and so we need to get rid of the individual mandate and get rid of the community waivers, and we're going to protect pre-existing conditions. That's been a big misnomer. But to answer your question directly, I'm concerned that what the Senate's doing does not repeal Obamacare enough. We had a full repeal in 2016 that passed the House and the Senate, and the president vetoed it, of course, President Obama. We would love to send that same bill through the House and Senate, but for some reason right now, a lot of Republicans who said that they were willing to repeal and replace Obamacare don't seem willing to do so when we're wanting to put that vote to the floor. So I'm afraid that the Senate version is pretty watered down. It's not as strong as the bill we sent to them, but I'd be willing to take a look if they can get something passed.
All right, so they have to get it passed, and then it would go to reconciliation, and you really don't know from there what is going to come out of it. And the administration is telling us kind of go with it, like just go with it. And then they give you the rules and say, look, the only way we fix this is because we can do it with 50. Then we get the reconciliation. We do that with 50. Otherwise, amendments, you got to go back to 60, and they'll never get that. And McConnell's not going to ever get rid of the 60-vote man-made cloture rule in the Senate, because then they would actually have to go on that record for stuff. So we all know that's not going to happen. So, I mean, a lot of this is just trust us. And I tell you,
right,
Congressman, it's tough for conservatives out there. We've been burned so many times. And now you got government officials saying, trust us. Mitch McConnell, trust me. And you got Tom Price, trust me, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. A lot of people just figure, you know what? We're going to go with this and we're going to get burned again. And it's not really repealing Obamacare. It's not addressing any of the issues to bring down premiums. It's just growing this government sector. I mean, how should our listeners right now, what should they be worried about with this?
Well, they should be worried about that we don't get a repeal that is a repeal, and that's my fear as well. We should go back to pre-Obamacare rules and rebuild from there, because basically what we're trying to do now is just repeal the mandate. And you're right, the health care that we're going to see in the next 1 to 2 or 3 years is not going to be a whole lot better than what we have now. And people who are actually paying for their insurance are really suffering. They're paying high premiums that they can't afford. They have high deductibles that they can't afford. It's like having a catastrophic plan, but you pay for your insurance, you pay your deductibles, you go to the doctor, you pay for the bill. The only one making out right now is the insurance company, and the people on Obamacare who are getting it for free are heavily subsidized. So the working class people have really taken a hit on this health care law that the president passed. And, you can't keep giving this away for free. We simply don't have the money. There's people that are able to work that should work. We shouldn't have the government telling us what we have to buy. So the upside to the Senate getting something passed is we can start to pick away at it. I, like you, am very nervous that we'll get something meaningful done. That's possible we can do things in phase 2 and phase 3 like insurance across state lines, but it'd be so much better if the Senate would take up the bill that the House sent them, pass something very similar to that, give people a chance to buy more inexpensive premiums, put the care back in their hands through health savings account, let them make the decisions, let them negotiate with the service providers. And we need to figure out where the heck they come up with pricing, because other than going to a expensive restaurant and ordering a lobster that says menu price, healthcare is almost that way. You go to the doctor, they can't tell you what something costs. You're just stuck at their mercy to pay whatever they decide. That's not the way healthcare should work. We should be able to shop around. There should be competition. We should be able to negotiate our prices with our health savings accounts.
You know what? What you just said is so easy to understand for people. I just don't know why your colleagues don't get that. The way you summed the whole thing up in about 2 minutes. And it's very frustrating because you look at the Senate bill, we were not in favor of the opening bill with the House. We were happy when it went down. We thought the second version was better, so we were in favor of that. But you look at this bill going through the Senate right now, it's worse than the first bill in the House that had to get approved.
Yeah, it is.
It's worse than that one.
We kept saving money. They just keep throwing money back in and increasing subsidies. Pretty soon, what you have basically is Obamacare. And a while back, John Boehner made a comment that they'll never repeal Obamacare. They'll just tweak a few things and change the name. Well, that's what it looks like the Senate's doing. So we've still got work to do.
I got a couple more minutes. Congressman, on that committee and looking at the potential Syrian ceasefire we've negotiated that includes a safe zone, as the president has been advocating for since when he was candidate Trump. Do you see this as progress? Do you think it can hold?
Well, those things are always very tenuous. It's held longer than I thought it would, to be honest. So I don't know what type of negotiations exactly went on with the president and President Putin from Russia. It's been a long, drawn-out war, and it just doesn't seem like it could be that simple. But we'll keep holding our breath.
All right. And one other thing I want to get to, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2018 that passed. You had an amendment in there to identify potential funding and capability shortfalls in the USA's nuclear enterprise. What's going on with that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The DOD has to put in an unfunded request information document, and the DOE does as well. The department or the nuclear program is a combination of the two. So what happens like over at Y-12 in Oak Ridge, which we have here in Tennessee, is they don't get to, or they don't have to right now, put a list of what their needs will be into the future. And I toured their facility over at Y-12 and witnessed some single-point failure items that did not make it on any of the request lists. It was kind of concerning, but I think what happens in the DOD, this funding comes from a higher source, and some of the areas that are not as much in the spotlight can get left behind. And we're not granting more funding, but we want to know what to expect in terms of transparency down the road. Like, what are their needs going to be? Rather than be surprised, let's be prepared for them. So what this did was request that they provide a list of the things that they need now or will need. Would make sense when it comes to our number one priority, nuclear deterrence. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, that wasn't in there, so we added that amendment in, and now we'll get a report of what those needs are. And some of the things I can't talk about because it was in a classified setting. Right. But I saw some things that were concerning to me, and I think that the rest of the Congress should know that as we appropriate going into next year.
All right. Sounds excellent, sir. We're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Scott DesJarlais for being with us, representing the 4th District of Tennessee, Republican. Congressman, thanks for being with us. More information, DesJarlais.house.gov. That's DesJarlais. DesJarlais.house.gov. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Great update.
Thank you, John.